What if you're not living your own life? What if every choice you've made is just an echo of someone else's voice in your head? Parents, teachers, society, religion, trends, they all told you who to be, what to believe, how to look, how to feel, even who to love. But have you ever truly chosen yourself? Carl Jung once said, "What you do not make conscious will appear in your life as fate, and you'll call it bad luck, failure, karma. But in truth, it's the result of running from yourself." Choosing yourself means breaking the pattern, destroying the mask, abandoning expectations, and standing face to face with something raw, terrifying, and real. Are you ready? Choosing yourself means stopping the lie. First of all, the lie to yourself. And that hurts, because your entire life might be built on convenient illusions. You pretend to be happy because you're afraid to admit you're living like a hostage. You smile so you don't seem weak. You agree so you won't be rejected. But Jung said, choosing yourself begins with conflict, because the real you will always clash with the false world. When you choose yourself, you're not just saying, "I live by my own rules now." You're shattering the display case you've been hiding behind for years. And behind that glass is loneliness, fear, rage, and unbearable freedom. Most people turn back. They return to the illusion because the truth is too heavy. But you're not most people. If you're reading this, something inside you has already started to wake up. And maybe you're standing on the edge of the most important decision in your life. To finally be yourself, not someone's reflection. Once you choose yourself, you become a threat. Because a free person is a glitch in the system. You don't obey. You don't bend. You don't play games written by others. You're not afraid of being alone. You don't need anyone's approval. And that scares people. Most live like trained dogs, chasing praise, like scraps of validation. But you stepped out of the circle. You started saying no. You began listening to silence instead of the crowd. You stopped being convenient. And then things get interesting. People who called you friend begin to distance themselves. Family tries to pull you back into the cage. The world gets offended by your independence. But this is the point. When you choose yourself, you lose everyone who loved your mask. Only those who see your face remain. There are few of them, but they are real. And for the first time, so are you. From this moment on, your life splits into before and after. Before, you were the product of other people's decisions. You studied where they told you to, worked where it was safe, chose partners based not on your heart, but on a checklist of what will they think. Now you begin to shape your own destiny, not in theory, in action. You start asking questions you've been avoiding. What do I really want? Who am I without all the roles? What does success mean to me? And then comes the inner revolution. You realize that much of what you were proud of wasn't even yours. Trophies for other people's battles. Diplomas you never needed. Relationships where you played a role. Money you paid for with your soul. And you start letting go. It's terrifying. Causes panic. Because everything familiar begins to collapse. But in that emptiness, a chance is born. A chance to build a life from scratch. On your terms. Not for approval, but for yourself. You begin to feel something growing inside you. Strength. Not loud. Not aggressive. Quiet like a spine. You stop rushing to explain yourself. You no longer justify your choices to people who aren't ready to understand. Because when you choose yourself, you owe nothing. You don't have to be liked or agreeable or easy to digest. You simply are. That alone unsettles others. Because their comfort depended on your compliance. But now you don't play along. You live. And for the first time, you see the world clearly. You notice how much around you is fake. The conversations, the relationships, the goals. You begin to see who is with you because they choose to be, and who stays out of fear or habit. And you let them go. No drama, no bitterness. You stop holding on. Because you've finally stopped holding on to what was destroying you. That's what real growth is. Not age, but the courage to be yourself, even if nobody claps. Choosing yourself isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. You start making different choices, ones that cut against your old habits. You wake up earlier because you respect your time. You stop saying yes to things that drain you. You no longer eat what numbs you. You stop spending time with people who leave you feeling smaller. You begin filtering, and at first it feels like loss, but in truth it's clarity. You're reclaiming control of your attention, your body, your words, your emotions. That's what freedom is, not doing whatever you want, but doing what aligns with your truth. Even when it's hard, even when no one joins you, because you realize it's better to be alone in truth than adored in self-betrayal. This is the beginning of the real path. No promises of ease, but the deep, steady knowing that you're finally living for real. But be ready, choosing yourself comes at a cost. And the cost isn't money, it's growing pain. Because everything weak in you will resist. All your fears will crawl to the surface. The fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the fear of not being enough. You'll start to see how deeply your need for approval has ruled your life. How it made you obedient. How it made you betray yourself over and over again. But you're not a child anymore. And you're done living for someone else's comfort. Jung said, "What you resist persists." So you stop running. You face the fear, not to fight it, but to feel it. That's the only way to become whole. And suddenly, you realize everything you've been chasing, strength, respect, confidence, was always inside. You just kept looking the wrong way. You start telling the truth, not to hurt others, but to stop hurting yourself by staying silent. You no longer pretend everything's fine. You stop agreeing to what poisons you. You draw the line when your boundaries are crossed. And yes, at first it shocks people. They're used to your polite compliance. But you don't have to be pleasant to be good. You don't have to smile while bleeding inside. You don't have to carry guilt that was never yours. This isn't selfishness. It's self-respect. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And your truth, that's your light. It's maturity. It's the moment when you stop hiding, stop explaining, stop begging. You simply say, "This is me." No mask, no filter, no fear. And from that, real respect is born. First within you, then around you. You stop being the victim. No more, "They did this to me. Life just turned out this way. Nobody understands me." You realize everything that happens is a result of what you've allowed. You allowed people to treat you like that. You stayed silent when you should have spoken. You waited when you should have acted. You feared when you needed to choose. But now you take responsibility. Fully. Not comfortably, but powerfully. Because as long as you blame, you stay weak. As long as you hand over your power, you remain dependent. But the moment you say, "I chose this, I allowed this, I lived like this," a grown-up life begins. And this is not about guilt. It's about power. Because if you can own it, you can change it. And if you can change it, you are free. People spend their whole lives waiting to be saved. But choosing yourself is the moment you say, "From now on, I save myself." And suddenly, it's no longer terrifying. Because now you're in control. You start to feel clarity. The noise fades. The rush disappears. That constant pressure to keep up, to compare, to chase, it loosens its grip. You stop measuring yourself against others. You stop needing to prove anything. Because you're no longer playing someone else's game. You step off the field you were always losing on, because it was never yours. You stop running after things that aren't meant for you. And for the first time, you ask, "What is truly mine?" The answer doesn't come fast. But slowly, you begin to hear yourself. Quietly, without pressure. You start to understand, happiness isn't a goal. It's a side effect of being in alignment. When you don't betray yourself. When you live by your own values. When you're no longer carrying the heavy mask. When you stop trying to impress. You just are. Real. Simple. Whole. And suddenly, that's enough. But hey, race the paradox. The closer you get to your true self, the more the world resists. Because your wholeness exposes their fakeness. The people who relied on your weakness lose their grip. Those who manipulated your guilt lose control. You no longer bite the emotional hooks. You don't respond to pressure. You don't bow to should or must. You say no. calmly, firmly, without drama, and that no is a hammer blow to the system. You begin to see how much in this world runs on fear. Families, friendships, careers. You see how often people trade their truth for comfort, and you realize you can't be part of that anymore. Even if it costs you a job, even if people leave, even if they call you selfish, because once you've tasted freedom, you don't go back. Even if freedom feels lonely, because being alone with yourself is better than being surrounded by people who don't know who you are. You begin to build your reality, not the one you were sold, the one you truly choose. No more templates like own a house by 30, get married, find a stable job. You throw out these shoulds like junk, because they hold no life, only fear of being different. But now you're not afraid. You walk a path where what matters isn't fitting in, but meaning, where every step is made not out of fear, but from inner alignment. You no longer chase success by someone else's definition. You chase what's real. That's the difference. You no longer need expensive things to feel worthy, because your worth is no longer external. It's in you. That inner foundation is stronger than any title, trophy, or praise. People keep running after image. You walk into depth, quietly, clearly, without noise, but with a dignity no one can fake because you didn't invent it. You found it, inside, and then it happens, silence. The one you used to fear. Now there's no crowd, no noise, no endless distractions. Just you, with yourself. No roles, no duties, no shoulds. And in that silence, something real begins. Because only in silence can you truly hear your own heart. Only in solitude can you really see yourself without filters, without defense. And what you find isn't emptiness, it's depth. You're not broken, you're clean. You didn't lose, you let go. And now you understand. All the pain you feared was just a door through fear, through grief, through truth. And behind that door is you, the real you, not torn between want and should, not begging for approval. You didn't become someone new. You just stopped hiding. And that is the quietest, strongest victory. Now you begin to act differently, not out of urgency, but out of clarity. Not because you're rushing, but because you know when the moment is right. You stop scattering your energy. You stop chasing noise. Every move becomes sharp, focused, intentional. While others run around comparing, reacting, seeking attention, you go inward. You choose stillness over distraction, meaning over status, depth over speed. It's not always pretty. It's not always easy, but it's always real. Because now you don't live for the image. You live for the essence. You no longer want to impress, you want to create. To build relationships that are honest. Work that has soul. A space where you can breathe. You become a creator, not a consumer. The author, not the audience. That's what choosing yourself means. You stop asking, "Can I?" You start saying, "Watch me." You begin to feel your boundaries. As if, for the first time, you've built walls around your peace, not to shut the world out, but to protect what matters. You no longer let people barge into your life. Not their chaos, not their guilt trips, not their manipulation. Before, you bend over backwards, so they don't get hurt, so they stay, so they like me. Now, no more. You're not cruel, you're clear. You're not aggressive, you're whole. You can say, "That doesn't work for me," calmly, firmly. People used to your endless flexibility might be shocked. They want like that you now have a no. But hey, race the truth. Your no makes your yes powerful. Your presence is no longer free. Your time, your attention, your emotions are not automatic. They're not owed. They're chosen. And that choice is yours. Not approved, not guaranteed, but free. And that is power no one can steal. You begin to choose your circle, not out of fear of being alone, but out of respect for yourself. Before, you clung to people who didn't hear you, tolerated those who crossed your boundaries, told yourself, "At least someone's there." Now you know loneliness is better than connection without depth. You no longer chase those who walk away. You don't beg for attention. You don't prove your worth. Because your worth isn't on display, it's within. And now only those who feel that stay. Those who don't demand but share. who don't use but respect. There are fewer of them, but they're real. You build relationships not out of need, but from fullness. Not from fear, but from strength. You're no longer afraid to be yourself, and so you attract those who aren't afraid either. That's a different kind of bond, not built on weakness, but born from the choice to say, I see you, and am not leaving. You begin to see pain differently. Before, you ran from it into work, food, distractions, relationships. You did everything not to feel, because you thought pain was the enemy. But now you understand, pain is a signal. It's not here to destroy, it's here to reveal. It shows where you're living a lie, where you're settling, where you're shrinking. You don't numb it anymore, you listen, and pain starts to speak. Clear, honest, brutal. Here you betrayed yourself. Here you were afraid. Here you gave up. And it's hard, but it's real. You learn to stay with it. No panic, no escape, because now you know pain doesn't kill, betrayal of self does. And pain cleans. It burns through the fake, cuts away the noise. It makes you real. Through it, you crystallize. From it, a strength is born, not from armor, but from what you've faced and lived through. You begin to respect the path, not the results, not the praise, not the finish line, but the walk itself. Before, you lived from one goal to the next, ticking boxes, achieving, proving, and yet each time you reached something, you felt empty, because in chasing the outcome, you kept losing yourself. Now it's different. Now you slow down. You no longer live for the destination. You live for the alignment, because that's where the truth is, in the step, not the spotlight. You start to see, even silence matters. Even stillness is part of movement. You learn to be, not just to do. You stop pushing yourself. You stop forcing. You stop sprinting. Because real power isn't in tension, it's in stability. In being able to move without needing noise. To keep going without needing applause. To stay yourself even when no one is watching. That's depth. That's maturity. That's yours now. You start to feel your energy shift. Before, you were tired even doing nothing, because you wasted yourself on resistance, on pretending, on fearing rejection. Now it's different. Now you can work for hours, sit in silence, walk alone, and still feel alive, because you're no longer leaking energy into lies. You're not draining yourself with explanations. You're not stealing your own attention by living someone else's life. And you realize you don't need much. Not praise, not noise, not constant stimulation. Because when you're on your true path, you don't need to be pushed. You move on your own. When you live your truth, you don't need escape. You can sit with yourself and feel peace. That's internal fuel. Not from adrenaline, but from meaning. You don't burn out. You burn bright, because you're no longer living against yourself. And that light, people see it. Even when you say nothing, you begin to feel gratitude, not for perfection, but for what's real. Before, you searched for reasons to be happy. Achievements, recognition, comfort. Now you're grateful for the truth, for waking up, for letting go of what wasn't yours, for finally being able to breathe, even if things aren't easy. Even if the path is rough, because it's yours. You stop comparing. You stop watching who's ahead, who's louder, who's better. You understand, what's meant for you will never miss you. And you stop demanding from life. You start listening, noticing, appreciating the quiet things. Warm light, honest eyes, silence without anxiety. This isn't weakness. It's maturity. It's the state where you no longer chase, you receive. Not from passivity, but from deep respect for yourself, for your timing, for your journey, and that is stronger than any success. And now you stand at a new edge, not in the glow of victory, but in the stillness of understanding. You didn't become someone else. You became yourself. You no longer chase roles. You no longer beg for rescuers. You no longer bend under someone else's truth. You live from within. No more proving, no more explaining. You've learned how to lose and not fall apart, how to be alone and not feel abandoned, how to choose without asking for permission. You've built an inner compass, not loud, not flashy, but true, and you follow it, even if the path is lonely, even if there's no applause, even if no one understands. Because now you know, the most important thing in life isn't success. It isn't status. It isn't recognition. The most important thing is not to betray yourself. And if you walk that path, you've already won. Quietly, deeply, completely. When you choose yourself, you choose life. Not the fake one, not the filtered one, the real one. No masks, no fear, no pretending. This path isn't for everyone. But if you've made it to these words, it might be yours. So don't turn back. Don't settle. Don't shrink. You're not here by accident. You are the one who's ready to go deeper. Drop a comment, "I choose myself," if this message spoke to you. Like the video, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who forgot who they are. It's time to come home to you.